I should have known better than to ignore the gut feeling that night. But hindsight is always 20/20ths, right? And when you're standing in the middle of a corporate party, surrounded by people you don't know, trying to keep it together for someone you love, it's easy to ignore what's happening right in front of you. But there was no ignoring it when it finally hit me. My fiancée, Natalie, had humiliated me in front of everyone. The worst part? I didn't even see it coming. It all started with something as simple as an office party. You know the kind: bright lights, overpriced hors d'oeuvres, and corporate types pretending to enjoy themselves. But for Natalie, it was more than just a party. It was her party. She was a senior executive at her firm, and every time she walked into a room, she owned it. I admired that about her, how effortlessly she commanded attention. But that night, I was a distant spectator in her world. A world I'd never quite understood and honestly didn't belong in. I wasn't what you'd call a networker. I wasn't the kind of guy who could make small talk with anyone. I had always been more comfortable at home, reading a book or watching a game than attending high society events. But I loved Natalie. So, I put on my best suit, shoved down my insecurities, and went with her, hoping to show her that I could fit into her world, even if it was just for one night. When we got there, it felt like I had stepped into a different universe. Everyone was laughing, chatting, and networking, their conversations filled with terms and references I didn't quite get. Natalie immediately slid into the crowd, effortlessly navigating through the sea of people, shaking hands, laughing at jokes I didn't catch. I stood by the wall, nursing a glass of wine, feeling more out of place than ever. Then, she introduced me to Tom. Tom was one of her colleagues, tall, broad-shouldered, and grinning like he knew he was the most interesting person in the room. He was a life-of-the-party kind of guy, the one who always had a story, always had the right words. He'd made a joke, and everyone laughed. I forced a chuckle and nodded along as he spoke to me, but his attention was on Natalie. It was clear from the start that they had a history. Maybe not a romantic one. At least, that's what I tried to convince myself. But they were comfortable with each other in a way that made me uncomfortable. I tried to shake off the jealousy. After all, they were just friends, right? And Natalie was just being friendly. But as the night dragged on, I couldn't help but notice how often their eyes met, how they kept gravitating toward each other, like magnets. I tried to distract myself, talking to some other people in the room, but it wasn't working. I kept watching them, unable to tear my eyes away from their exchanges. There was something in the way they interacted, something I couldn't put my finger on, that didn't sit right with me. Then it happened. I had stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The event was overwhelming, and I needed a moment to clear my head. But as I stepped back inside, I froze. There, at the far end of the room, was Natalie and Tom, standing closer than I had ever seen them before. She was leaning in, whispering something in his ear, and he was smiling that smile, the one that said everything without saying a word. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach, but it wasn't working. It was the way she was looking at him. Her eyes, wide and bright, a little too soft, like she was enjoying his company a little too much. I took a step toward them, but then I saw her hand on his chest. A casual touch, nothing too intimate, but enough to make my blood run cold. I should have turned around. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, I stood there, frozen in the doorway, watching them, as if I were waiting for something to happen, waiting for the moment that would prove that I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew that this was more than just a friendly exchange. There was something happening between them, something that wasn't meant to be seen, not meant to be shared. And that's when it happened. They kissed. Not a quick peck or anything innocent, but a kiss that lasted too long. A kiss that told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't a mistake, not a moment of weakness. It was deliberate. I turned and walked away, not even looking back. The air felt thick around me. My mind was racing, trying to piece everything together, trying to understand why this was happening. My legs carried me to the parking lot without a second thought. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to confront her in front of everyone. I just needed to leave. I sat in my car for what felt like hours. The betrayal was sharp, real, and raw. I couldn't breathe. My mind replayed that moment over and over again. How long had this been going on? How long had I been in the dark? When Natalie called, I didn't answer. I knew she'd come looking for me, and she did. About an hour later, I saw her walking across the parking lot toward my car. Her expression was unreadable, but I could see the worry in her eyes. When she got in, she didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me, waiting for me to say something. But what could I say? What was left to say? Finally, she broke the silence. Trevor, what's wrong? I know something's off. I turned to her, my heart pounding in my chest. Don't act like you don't know, I said, my voice low and shaky. I saw you. I saw everything. Her face paled. She didn't deny it. She didn't have to. I could see it in her eyes. The tears started to well up, but I fought them back. You humiliated me, Natalie. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. And for what? For him? The silence between us was deafening. And that was when I knew. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I didn't need to know why. Because nothing would change what I saw, what I knew. I should have left then. But I didn't. Not yet. That would come later. I should have said something right there, in the car. I should have let it all out. But I didn't. Instead, I sat in silence, staring out the windshield as Natalie's breathing became shallow, like she was waiting for me to say something. Anything. But I couldn't. I was too angry. Too hurt. She kept glancing at me, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for my arm. Trevor, please, talk to me, she whispered, but it felt empty. How could I talk to her when everything I thought I knew about us was a lie? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I turned to her. I saw you in him. Don't even try to deny it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but the fury was clear. Her face went pale, her lips parted in shock, but there was no remorse in her eyes. Trevor, she stopped herself, as if she realized there were no words that could undo the damage. She didn't apologize. She didn't even seem surprised that I knew. And that was the worst part. I don't know what you think you saw, she began, her voice shaking now, but it's not what you think. I swear. But I could hear the unease in her tone, the cracks starting to show. I shook my head. You don't get it. I saw everything. The way you were looking at him. The way you touched him. I'm not blind, Natalie. She bit her lip, a flicker of guilt crossing her face, but she quickly masked it. It's not what it seemed, Trevor. I swear. It's complicated. I couldn't believe my ears. Complicated? Are you serious? You're kissing another guy, and it's complicated? The words came out sharper than I intended, but at that moment, I didn't care. I needed her to understand how badly she'd hurt me. Her eyes welled up with tears. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't know what happened. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. A stupid mistake? That's what this was to her. It felt like a gut punch. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and more than anything, disrespected. You're telling me this was just a mistake? I laughed bitterly, shaking my head in disbelief. Natalie, I don't know who you are anymore. How long has this been going on? How many times have you done this behind my back? The silence that followed was deafening. She couldn't answer, and that was the worst part. Finally, she broke the silence. I'm sorry, Trevor. I don't know what else to say. I've messed up, but this isn't who I am. I love you. The words stung. You love me? I echoed. Because love doesn't look like what I just saw. Love doesn't involve kissing someone else behind your partner's back. Her hands were shaking as she reached out to touch mine, but I pulled away. Please don't, I said quietly. I can't even look at you right now. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of our breathing. The weight of the situation pressed on me. The feeling of betrayal, of being lied to by the one person I trusted, was suffocating. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want to hear how sorry she was. The damage was done, but I still couldn't leave. I didn't want to be the guy who walked away, not yet. So I stayed, and I listened to her, even though I knew deep down that it wouldn't change anything. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, her voice soft. I just want you to understand that it wasn't what it looked like. But I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. I wanted to get out of the car. I wanted to walk away and never look back. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed there, staring at her, trying to process everything she'd just said. She was sorry, but I didn't know if that was enough anymore. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, she said something that completely shattered what was left of my faith in her. I've been seeing him for months, Trevor, she admitted. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And that was when everything changed. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I've been seeing him for months, she said, her voice trembling. But there was no way to take those words back. I couldn't process what I was hearing. For a few seconds, I just stared at her, my mind racing, trying to make sense of everything. How long? How could she betray me like that? Months. I finally managed to rasp out. Months, Natalie. She nodded, her face pale, eyes welling up with tears. I didn't want to hurt you, Trevor. I swear. I never planned for it to happen. It just did. It started out innocent, but it became something more, and I didn't know how to stop it. Her words stung, each one like a needle pricking at the last shreds of trust one had left. Innocent? How does that even make sense? You kissed him, and you expect me to believe this is all just some mistake? I couldn't stop the anger now. It was like a storm brewing inside of me, every second more intense than the last. I thought you were the one person I could trust, I said, my voice shaking with the weight of it all. I gave you everything, Natalie. And you chose him. She reached out, but I pulled away, not wanting her touch, not wanting anything from her. I couldn't even look at her without feeling disgusted. I know, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't want this to happen. I wasn't thinking clearly. And now I've ruined everything. I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. But please believe me when I say it wasn't planned. It wasn't intentional. But nothing she said was enough. The damage had been done, and no apology, no explanation, could undo what had already happened. I couldn't wrap my head around how she could have done this, how she could have kept it from me for so long. You kept this from me for months, Natalie, I said, my voice low, almost cold. You lied to me every day. You knew this was wrong, and you still kept it going. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. She just stared at me, helpless. I had been living a lie. All that time, thinking we were building something solid. A future together. A life I was proud of. But it was all a lie. The reality hit me hard, like a freight train, and I couldn't stop it. You don't get it. I continued, my hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. I don't care about your excuses. I care that you've betrayed me, that you've humiliated me, not just once, but repeatedly, behind my back. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered, the tears now falling freely. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear. I was just confused. I didn't know what I wanted. Confused? She didn't know what she wanted? And now she was telling me this? After everything? I felt the walls closing in around me. My chest tightened as I tried to control the rising panic. I couldn't breathe. The woman I loved, the one I thought I knew better than anyone, had shattered everything. I had spent months, no, years, trusting her, believing in us. And now it was all gone. I looked at her, eyes hard, trying to block out the flood of emotions that threatened to break me. I don't know who you are anymore, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, pleading, Trevor, please don't say that. I'm still me. I haven't changed. I love you. But the words felt hollow now. How could she still claim to love me after everything? How could she still look at me and expect me to believe it? I needed space. I needed to think. I couldn't do this anymore. I can't do this, I said, getting out of the car before she could say anything else. I walked away without looking back, my heart in my throat. Every step I took away from her felt like a step toward the truth, toward realizing just how deeply she had hurt me. I walked away from the car, my mind spinning, my heart pounding. The cool night air hit my face, but it didn't do anything to calm the storm raging inside me. I wanted to scream, to throw something, anything, to make this all stop. But no amount of anger could change the fact that everything I knew, everything I thought was real, had just crumbled to dust. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away from her, from everything. The city lights blurred as I walked down the quiet streets, trying to outrun the hurt. But no matter how fast I moved, the pain was still there, following me, clinging to my every step. I thought about calling someone, maybe my brother, maybe a friend, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. How could I explain this? How could I tell anyone what had just happened? How could I say, hey, my fiancée has been cheating on me for months? I couldn't. I couldn't face that reality. Minutes turned into hours as I wandered aimlessly, the weight of betrayal crushing me with each passing second. It felt like the entire world had turned against me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have not seen the signs? I reached a park, the silence almost suffocating, and sat on one of the benches. My mind replayed everything. Her words, her touch, the way she acted so normal, like nothing had changed. Was it really just a mistake? Was I just overreacting? I couldn't even trust my own thoughts anymore. The person I had trusted most in this world had deceived me in ways I couldn't even fathom. I closed my eyes, trying to block it all out, but the image of her and Tom, her smile, the way they looked at each other, kept replaying in my head. I took out my phone and saw I had missed a dozen texts from Natalie, but I didn't want to read them. I didn't want to hear anything she had to say right now. What could she possibly say that would make it okay? Just as I was about to throw my phone back in my pocket, it buzzed again. Another message from her. This one was different. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Please talk to me. I'm so sorry, Trevor. I need you to understand. The words burned into me like a brand. I wanted to respond, to lash out, but I didn't. I couldn't. She had taken everything from me, my trust, my love, and now she wanted me to listen, to understand? No, it was too late for that. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Then, with a deep breath, I did something I never thought I'd do. I blocked her number. It wasn't out of spite. It wasn't even out of anger, though I felt plenty of both. It was because I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep letting her play with my emotions, my life. I needed to take control. I needed to stop letting her have power over me. I stood up from the bench and began walking back toward my car, my mind clearer than it had been in hours. It was time to face what was coming. I wasn't going to pretend everything was okay. I wasn't going to let her back into my life just because she was sorry. Not anymore. The silence of the park felt like a final chapter closing on the life I once knew. The person I had been with, the person I thought I loved, had shattered everything. And now, I was left picking up the pieces, trying to figure out who I was without her. But one thing was for sure. I wasn't going back. Not this time. The next few days were a blur. I stayed in my apartment, avoiding any contact with Natalie. Her calls and messages flooded in, each one more desperate than the last. At first, I considered responding, but the thought of hearing her voice again made my stomach turn. I had to remind myself why I'd made the decision to cut her off, even though it felt unnatural, like I was tearing apart a part of my own soul. I didn't want to feel this way. I didn't want to be angry. I didn't want to be heartbroken, but I couldn't ignore it any longer. The reality of what she had done kept slamming into me like a freight train every time I closed my eyes. I had never imagined that someone I trusted so completely could betray me so completely. The guilt started to creep in, too. Was I the one who had missed the signs? Had I been blind to everything around me because I was too comfortable, too trusting? I thought about how many times I had ignored my own instincts, how I had convinced myself that things were fine, when deep down, I knew something was wrong. There were subtle changes in her behavior I'd brushed off as nothing. A little more distance between us, a little more time spent at work, a few late-night meetings that never added up. But I didn't question them. I wasn't the jealous type, or at least I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be the guy who always second-guessed everything, who was always suspicious. But now, standing on the other side of all of this, I could see it, clearly, painfully. I should have paid attention. I should have listened to that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. That's the part that hurt the most. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't have the courage to confront it. And now, I was paying the price for my own blind trust. But then came the call. It wasn't from Natalie. It was from her best friend, Claire. I hadn't spoken to Claire much outside of the occasional dinner or get-together, but she had always been kind to me. Her voice, though, when she called, was full of something I hadn't expected, guilt. "Trevor, it's Claire. I need to talk to you," she said, her voice hesitant. "Can we meet up, please?" I hesitated, unsure if I was ready for any more of this. But then again, I wasn't going to get any peace until I had all the answers. I agreed to meet her, figuring I might as well hear her out. We met at a quiet cafe the next afternoon. She was already sitting at a corner table when I walked in, her face strained and tired, like she hadn't slept in days. As soon as she saw me, she stood up, and I could see the pain in her eyes. "Trevor, I didn't know how to say this," Claire began, her voice shaking. "But you deserve to know what's been going on." I took a seat across from her, my heart racing again. "What are you talking about, Claire?" She looked around, almost like she was making sure no one was listening. "Natalie, she's been seeing Tom for months, but it's worse than you think. I didn't want to tell you this, but I can't just stand by and let you suffer like this. Tom, he's not just some coworker. He's been a part of her life in ways that you never knew." My mind was reeling. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Claire lowered her gaze, clearly conflicted, but she pushed on. "They've been together for more than just late-night meetings, Trevor. I know you've seen them together, But there's more. They've been seeing each other outside of work, talking, meeting up, even spending weekends together. My stomach churned. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Are you telling me they were? How long has this been going on? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with regret. It started a while ago. But what you don't know is that Natalie's been torn between you and him for months. She didn't want to let you go, but she couldn't stop seeing him. I tried to talk to her. I tried to make her see what she was doing, but she wouldn't listen. She's been lying to you, Trevor, and I think she's starting to realize how much she's ruined. Her words hit me like a bomb. All the pieces clicked into place, but it didn't make it any easier to process. It wasn't just an isolated incident. It wasn't just a kiss or a one-time slip-up. This was a full-blown betrayal, a double life. I didn't know what to say. My mouth was dry, and my mind felt like it was shutting down. Everything I thought I knew about our relationship, about Natalie, was now in question. Claire looked at me with sympathy. I never wanted you to find out like this, but I couldn't just let you keep hurting. She needs to be honest with you, but I don't think she's ready to face the truth herself. I sat back in my chair, stunned. It was all too much. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I had to leave. I had to process this. Thanks for telling me, I said quietly, standing up. I need time to think. Claire looked at me, her face filled with guilt. I'm sorry, Trevor. I really am. I nodded, feeling numb. I turned and left the cafe, not knowing where I was going, but knowing one thing for sure. My life would never be the same again. The streets felt colder now. Maybe it was just me, but everything seemed off. The buzz of the city, the people passing by, nothing felt real. I was numb, walking through life like a ghost. I couldn't shake the thoughts that kept spiraling in my mind. Natalie, Tom, the lies. I kept telling myself that I needed to process everything. But how could I? How could I move on when the truth had shattered everything I believed in? I didn't even know where I was going, my feet leading me through the streets like I was on autopilot. The conversation with Claire echoed in my head. They'd been meeting, weekends together. How could she do this to me? I stopped by a bench near a small park, sitting down hard, as if the weight of the world was bearing down on me. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. I looked down at my phone, the dozens of missed texts and calls from Natalie still staring at me, taunting me. But it was too late for explanations. Too late for apologies. I couldn't be that guy anymore. The one who let everything slide. The one who forgave too easily. I had trusted her. I had given her everything. And she'd betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. My fingers hovered over my phone for a moment before I shut it off completely, dropping it into my pocket. It felt like cutting off the last lifeline to her. The last string that kept me tethered to the relationship I thought was real. I spent the next few hours just walking, trying to clear my head, but the images of Natalie and Tom, laughing, touching, whispering, it wouldn't leave me. I couldn't get it out of my head. The betrayal was like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I walked by a bar, the sound of laughter spilling out from inside, but I kept walking. I didn't want distractions. I didn't want to forget. Not yet. I needed clarity. I needed to understand why. But I also knew that no explanation would ever make it okay. By the time I got home, it was late, and I was exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. I didn't even bother to change. I collapsed onto the couch, my head spinning. How had everything turned so dark? How had she gone from the woman I thought I knew to someone I barely recognized? I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. It couldn't. Because as much as I tried to block it out, I knew one thing for sure. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. Tomorrow, I'd have to face her. But tonight, I needed to process. I needed to finally let myself feel the full weight of everything she had done. And it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. The following morning, I woke up with a dull ache in my chest. It wasn't physical pain, but something far worse, something I couldn't shake. The sun was barely peeking through the blinds, casting weak light across the room. I had barely slept, my mind racing through every moment with Natalie, every lie I'd convinced myself to believe. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't just pretend it wasn't happening. She was going to call again, and I had to face her. I grabbed my phone, staring at the black screen for a moment, unsure whether to check the messages. Part of me didn't want to see them, didn't want to hear her voice again. But I knew I had to. I had to know what she was thinking, what she was going to say to justify all of this. I opened the first message. Please, Trevor, let's talk. I can explain. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It was the same thing she'd been saying all week, over and over. I knew what she wanted, but the truth was, there was no explanation that could make me forget what I had seen. There was no apology that would erase the image of her and Tom together. I closed the phone and put it back in my pocket. I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want to let her have the power to keep me hanging on. It was time to make a decision. By the time the afternoon came, I had finally worked up the courage to face her. I called her, but it was a brief conversation. She agreed to meet, and we set a time to talk. But I already knew it wasn't going to change anything. It couldn't. When I walked into the coffee shop later that day, I saw her sitting at the back table, her eyes red, her face drawn. She looked nothing like the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman sitting there now was broken, but not in a way I could pity. I wasn't sure I felt anything for her at that moment. She stood up when she saw me. "Trevor, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But I could already feel the distance between us. I didn't want to hear it anymore. I didn't want to hear her explanations, her apologies, her excuses. "Stop," I said before she could go on. "Stop apologizing. Stop trying to explain it. Nothing you say is going to make me forget what I saw." She looked stunned, her lips trembling as if she was about to cry, but I didn't want to comfort her. I didn't want to tell her it was going to be okay. I wanted her to understand that it wasn't okay. "Trevor, please," she said, stepping closer. "I never meant for this to happen. I know I've messed up, but I need you to know it wasn't easy for me. I never wanted to hurt you." I stood still, the weight of her words sinking in, but they didn't reach me. They didn't change anything. I had given her my trust, my love, and she had thrown it all away. "I loved you," I said quietly, my voice raw. "I gave you everything. And you betrayed me. You chose him over me." Her face crumpled at the words, but there was nothing in her expression that could undo the damage. I had heard enough. "I can't keep doing this," I said, my voice steady now. "I can't keep pretending this is fixable. It's over, Natalie." For a moment, we just stood there. She didn't speak, didn't try to stop me. I could see it in her eyes. She knew. She knew this was the end. I turned and walked away without looking back, the door swinging shut behind me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of my decision settling in, but at least it was final. At least it was done. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't need to. I was done being the guy who waited for answers, who waited for things to change. I had to take control of my own life. And I was done living in the shadow of her betrayal. The hardest part wasn't walking away. It was accepting that the person I thought I knew, the person I had loved, was someone I could never trust again. I was free now, but the silence was deafening. The days that followed weren't easy, but they were necessary. Walking away from Natalie wasn't just about leaving her behind. It was about leaving the version of myself that I had been for so long. The one who kept giving second chances, the one who let the weight of someone else's mistakes define him. I realized that I had been living in the shadow of a love that wasn't real, and now, for the first time in what felt like forever, I was living for myself. At first, it felt strange, quiet, almost like I was walking through life in a fog. But as time passed, the fog began to lift. I started focusing on things I had neglected, like the friendships I had pushed aside while I was wrapped up in my relationship with Natalie. I reached out to old friends, reconnected with family members, and even started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in months. I found joy in the small things, morning coffee at my favorite cafe, a quiet evening reading, or even a spontaneous walk through the city. I didn't need anyone else to validate me. I didn't need someone else to make me feel whole. For the first time in a long time, I realized that I was enough on my own. A few weeks later, I bumped into Claire at the same cafe where I had met Natalie. She looked surprised to see me, but there was a warmth in her eyes when she saw me. She came over, and we talked for a while. It felt good to finally have someone who understood the depth of the pain I had gone through, but it also felt good to be able to smile again, genuinely. "I'm glad you're okay, Trevor," she said, giving me a small smile. "I know it's been hard, but you're stronger than you realize." I nodded, grateful for her support, but I knew she was right. I had survived the worst, and now I was building something new, something for myself. The hardest part of healing was accepting that it would take time, that it was okay to feel the weight of the past, but that it wasn't my future. I wasn't going to let one broken relationship define me. I wasn't going to let betrayal steal my peace. Months passed, and one evening, I found myself walking through the park near my apartment, the sun setting in a vibrant orange sky. I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in so long. I realized that I was no longer haunted by the past. I had let it go. That was when I met her, Elena. She was sitting on a bench, reading a book, completely absorbed in it. Our eyes met as I walked by, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of my past. It felt like the world was opening up again. We started talking, just casually at first, but something about her felt different. She was kind, funny, and easy to talk to. We made plans to meet up again, and over the next few weeks, I realized something. I wasn't looking for someone to fix me. I wasn't looking for someone to fill the empty space left behind by my past. I was simply looking for someone to share life with, and for the first time, I understood what that really meant. As I walked away from that first conversation with Elena, I felt a sense of peace settle in my heart. The past was behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I was moving forward. I didn't need to be defined by betrayal, by the mistakes of someone else. I was my own person, ready for the next chapter. And that chapter? It was going to be mine to write.